What's up, FA Nation? Welcome to another Tuesday edition of the Waiver Wire live stream at Fantasy Alarm, getting you ready to win your playoff weeks.
Playoff time here, Jen. Playoff time.
One more game. There's still one more game.
True,
but I know a lot of you already know that you're going forward, and a lot of you are hanging on to a prayer. I'm joined by Jon Impemba, our managing editor and the co-host of Alarm After Hours on Monday nights on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Jon, how are you doing? How are your teams going? And who are you hoping to play really well in tonight's game?
Yeah, so fortunately, nothing that I have involves tonight's game. So I'm already either out or in my leagues. I was able to secure a bye in one of my home leagues, which was fantastic. Another league, I was able to be the top scoring team for the fifth week this season. I'm the top scoring team overall on the year, but I'm going to be settling into a 4 seed. So I'll have to be playing in week 1 there. But overall, not too bad of a fantasy football season in terms of playoff standings.
I like it. I am holding on to a couple players in the games today. But I think there's only one that even if I lose this week, I should be in playoffs. But I'm still going to be watching the game pretty excitingly today because we're blessed to have a Tuesday game, even if it's
amazing.
Only the Cowboys.
I love having football as many days as we can. I understand the players don't enjoy the product.
No.
Or, playing Wednesday football last week was great. Midday football, it's great. But I'll be cheering. I'll have some showdown lineups in there. Howard Bender has the DFS showdown playbook already posted, so I'll have some investment into watching today's game.
And our showdown lineups have been really fire. Really, showdown lineups are often lotto tickets. They're just a lot of luck. It's just one game. We're just picking a couple players and really making it fit in that grid with salary. But I've read our write-ups and I've made a few picks as well, and they've been very fortunate to. So hopefully we'll go forward. I know Howard did today's showdown slate. So we've had Adam, you, and Howard all give showdown slate.
Yeah, we hit the James Washington touchdown yesterday. That was big for our.
That's impressive.
7%. So that was a nice home run hit there for sure.
Very impressive. Much harder hit than my pick of Gabriel Davis, which was fairly obvious, but still, it worked.
It came through. So that's all.
Yeah, it came through. All right, guys, but it is time to get pretty serious because we are moving into the playoffs, and this is what you've been waiting for. This is what you've been building for, and I hope you still have a lot of fab budget, but if you don't, we're also going to help you with some really deep cuts. I'm going to put out a separate video after this as well for those. But let's just go down the list, Jon, and talk about some stuff that's going on. We'll start at quarterback. Obviously, those who follow Fantasy Alarm and have followed some of our live streams know I do not have an affinity, and neither does Jon Impemba, for Mr. Baker Mayfield. However, he did have a very, very good game on Sunday, and we did expect him to. We knew he had a good matchup. We didn't maybe expect it to be this good, which is good. No. But my question to you is, we have a lot of Browns fans and a lot of just Baker Mayfield fans out there that are pretty sure this is only going to go straight up for Baker. What is your confidence level in Baker Mayfield going forward?
So I don't mind him as a stash if you're planning for the championship, right? Like week 16 against the Jets. Yep, go ahead and play him. That's fine. But week 14, home against Baltimore, I think is going to be a tough go against him. And all the way back in week 1, they played that Baltimore defense. Didn't have a good fantasy outing there, only 9 fantasy points. And then week 15, they have the Giants, and that Giants defense is really coming on strong of late. We just saw them have 5 sacks and shutting down Seattle in Seattle. They have the Giants defense has 11 or more fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 weeks. So how is Baker going to go up against a tougher defense? And Jen, this is what we've been saying the whole time about Baker. When he plays bad teams, he puts up good numbers. Look at his career stats against the Bengals and Jacksonville's horrible defense and Tennessee's all these teams that are in the bottom 5 to 8 in DVOA. Baker seems to produce well against because he doesn't have to read a tough defense, or he's not being pressured, or the secondary isn't that great. So he has the time to make the throws. And for the most part, we've seen him make throws when they're open. We've seen him miss guys when they're open, but for the most part, he's at least connecting on those. Well, Baltimore's going to give him some fits, in my opinion. The Giants defense, the way they've been playing lately, should give him some problems. Bradbury's there playing elite cover defense right now, taking away, the top receivers on teams. We know Baltimore secondary and line. So these next 2 weeks is really going to be a show me here for Baker. If he can come through and be a solid fantasy performer, then then I'll give him credit for turning the edge. And maybe the new offense is finally starting to take hold. The running game's taking some of the pressure of it. All of those things could be coming. But at least in week 16, we know he has the Jets waiting for him. And that I expect to be a really big fantasy performance.
So we're okay with Baker Mayfield as a deep stash if you're stashing him for week 16, which could be an important week. But don't get the idea that he's going to be startable necessarily every week from henceforth. And I know there's a lot of panic out there. I mean, people who had Justin Herbert, he put up an egg, like 0. Kyler Murray didn't have one of his best games. Yeah. Russ was disappointing. A lot of disappointments out there. But I think in general, I would start all of those guys before I would start Baker Mayfield.
Kyler's certainly concerning now. He threw the 3 touchdowns. That was great. But he's not running, and I think it's to protect that arm. And I mean, a lot of Kyler's fantasy production this year was because he was a running quarterback. He was on pace to lead the league in rushing touchdowns as a quarterback, rushing yards as a quarterback. And now you look at the last 2 2 or 3 games since he got hurt. He's not running. He's not running at all. He's not running for touchdowns. And that, now if you have to rely on him to throw it definitely is a little bit of a damper.
Yeah. So a few more quarterbacks to touch on. I want to ask you about this. Again, I understand Eagles fans very frustrated with Carson Wentz, though I have to say, overall, he's actually been a fairly dependable fantasy quarterback. He's probably, top 14, something like that, top 12, 14.
He got a lot of early, fantasy production out of the way. He had, 5 rushing touchdowns basically to start the year.
Yeah, and even last week he had a good week.
Yeah, last week he didn't know. 2 weeks ago against Seattle, he had 18 fantasy points against it. Last week he got pulled, so it was kind of hard for him to have.
Yeah, that's what I meant by I was calling last week.
So, against Seattle he did. Yeah. So against Seattle he had 18 fantasy points, 2 touchdowns, 40 yards rushing. So for the most part, he hasn't been the worst. There's certainly been weeks where he's been the worst. And then they pulled the plug on him, this week against Green Bay. And listen, a lot of people are going to be excited for Jalen Hurts. He's a younger, more athletic, mobile quarterback. But that offensive line is still one of the worst offensive lines in football. There's a reason why Carson Wentz was on pace to be the 5th most sacked quarterback in NFL history this season. It wasn't because he was just standing there being a statue. He was being pressured on 38% of his dropbacks. He was being sacked on almost a quarter of those dropbacks. I mean, he had no time to throw to any open receivers. Now, can Hurts maybe extend the play a little bit? Maybe, but again, Carson Wentz isn't an immobile quarterback. He's capable of moving around and running a little bit, but he just had no time to do so. So I'm limiting my expectations here against Hurts, especially they're starting him against the Saints, and that Saints defense has been a nightmare for everybody lately. So I don't know how you're expecting much production to come from Hurts this week. I don't think he's going to have much time with the way that line has been playing. The pass rush for the Saints has been incredible. This is this is a big trial by fire if we're going to go throw Jalen Hurts out there this week.
I agree. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make and see if you agreed with me. A lot of people very excited. You saw the sparks. You saw him hit Jalen Reagor. That feels exciting. But again, look, even when Dak Prescott exited the game, Andy Dalton came in and looked like he could really move the team downfield. And he looked like he was going to be fine. This is, a short period of evaluation. Don't go overboard for Jalen Hurts. He's not the second coming. There are problems in Philadelphia that are much bigger than Carson Wentz, even though Carson Wentz is bearing the brunt of them. I'm not saying Carson Wentz is a fantastic quarterback and whatever, but you do need to come up with a plan.
It's not fair to Carson Wentz what's happening this year. It's really not. I've seen so many tweets of people ready to bury him. I'm like, just look at the offensive line stats. Look at the play calling. They're not giving him any relief there. They're not trying to run the football to take. They were literally setting him back there, and he's just getting hammered over and over and over again. And that takes a toll mentally, physically. He definitely, it's probably for his best safety and health.
Totally.
Sit out the rest of this year,
For real. If I were him, I'd probably be like, you know what? Fine. You take the beating now.
Right.
By the way, guys, there is an article on fantasyalarm.com by Dan Malin. He does it. It comes out every Tuesday morning. It's fantastic. It has a bunch of waiver wire picks. I'm just glancing at it right now to mention a couple other names that he has found that could still be on the wire. To me, these guys seems like they would already be rostered on your bench, but let's go ahead and mention them. Kirk Cousins, who looked a little scary at halftime last week. If you played him, you probably thought, this is the week he's not going to do right after a few in a row. But he came through. Kirk Cousins, Phillip Rivers, which you and I mentioned last week on the stream.
Hey,
He
you
had
were
a
all
good
about T.Y. Hilton, and you crushed that one.
Yeah, that was a little lucky, but I had a feeling based on his past performance. So, and then he has Matt Stafford here. If someone's dropped Matt Stafford, we saw Matt Stafford put up huge numbers last week.
400 yards passing, which is crazy.
Unbelievable. I have him in my big money league. I had him on the bench, but for Derek Carr, so it worked out.
Right.
And I had Waller.
Yeah, Waller
That was a very exciting point.
Yeah. Waller was nice.
So those guys, if they're still out there, we advocate you going to grab them. All right, let's head over to running back. Now, I've asked you about this player, I think, every single Monday we've done this stream. Are you in yet on stashing?
I'm now ready to change my answer because we finally saw the change that I was looking for. And was that he dominated the snaps.
Right.
The previous couple of weeks, we're talking about Cam Akers, for those of you who weren't aware, because I cut Jen off there really quickly. Listen, the previous couple of weeks when he had scored, he was only playing 25% of the snaps, 20% of the snaps, so he was still being outsnapped by Henderson and Brown. This week, however, he played 67%, I think it was, of the snaps, or 65%, in that mid 60% of the snap count range. Dominated the touches over everybody else, over 20 carries. Brown was a complete afterthought. Henderson still does the change of pace work and got his score there. But this is what we wanted to see. If Cam Akers was going to be the lead running back, then then you need to have ownership of him. Now, Jen, you held on to him for as long as you could. It paid off, and you're going to now probably benefit from having him moving into the playoffs.
I played him for the first time this week.
You played him, paid off huge. They have a great schedule coming up. New England's not as good against the run. The Jets, I guess technically their best thing they do is defend the run, but they're not really good against the run either. Seattle. So they have some good matchups coming up for Akers where if he's going to get this type of usage, he's going to get this volume of snaps, then he becomes the player that we all thought he was going to be when we drafted him back in the preseason. We thought he was going to be the Gurley replacement. We thought he was going to be the lead back, and Henderson would be the change of pace. And then he got hurt, and things kind of tailspin from him there. And then McVay didn't use him at all. And then he came out of the bye, and he was in this three-way timeshare. But, once these coaches seemingly have committed to these rookie running backs, and those more so taken in that second round, I'm talking about Swift and Dobbins and Akers and Taylor this year, when those guys started really dominating the snap counts, they were all productive. Injuries have certainly sidelined them. Dobbins got COVID, Swift has a concussion, and Akers had his injury. Taylor's had to battle some inconsistency there, but for the large part, when those guys were given the lion's share of the touches, their talent shone out. So I'm excited to see what Akers can do to finish this year.
So we do advocate picking up Cam Akers. He's a pretty high priority for me on the waiver wire if you can get him. However, it does still come with an asterisk that we're still talking about Sean McVay, and you cannot really predict. So just bear that in mind. Just because it's been Cam Akers week doesn't necessarily mean he won't just randomly change his mind and go another way. For instance, yesterday, I think we were all screaming at the TV saying, why isn't there more Mostert? Why are you using Tevin Coleman here? All these kind of things. So remember, fantasy coaches real life coaches are not necessarily thinking of fantasy coaching. Right. So do bear that in mind, especially with Sean McVay. We have to talk about Detroit. Should DeAndre Swift stay compromised, as it seems that he might? Unfortunately, really distressful news. Both Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson worth an ad?
Peterson, yes. I'm done trying to figure out Kerryon Johnson. There's no reason to. You look at the volume the last 2 weeks. It's Adrian Peterson there now. Yards per carry wise, not great. 3.7, 3.6 against Houston and Chicago. 4 total rushing touchdowns, though, and 15 carries in those games. Now he gets Green Bay. We know you can run against Green Bay. Tennessee, you can run against Tennessee. So week 14, week 15, Adrian Peterson's a guy that, you should be, looking to grab up if he's still there. I think the volume should be there, and it's a really good spot. It's funny to think we're still talking about Adrian Peterson in this light, but here we are.
And someone else we're still talking about, Frank Gore. Although he did leave with a concussion,
I think it was, right?
Forced out. So Ty Johnson came in, performed really admirably. I think it was 104 yards and a touchdown. Really did a good job, looked good. Now, my question to you is, they're facing Seattle this week. Now, should Frank Gore now come back, I think it's going to be Ty Johnson based on how the carries were split. Even if Frank Gore does come back, maybe will they have enough common sense to go with the young guy? And are you worried about Seattle? Because when I dug into the numbers, it did look like Seattle was allowing the 6th least rushing yards per game for the course of the year. However, over the last 3 games, more like the 13th least. And their last game, they allowed like 190 yards on the ground. So I feel
Gallman
like,
torn up. So
yeah, and Gallman, right? Not like, I mean, don't worry.
Hey, the
Gallman's been
Gallmanator.
good.
I've dubbed him the Gallmanator, so he's
he is
he's
Gallman.
worth it now. Listen, Ty Johnson is an interesting guy. He was more of the pass catching back while Gore was healthy, and then Gore gets out, and then they transitioned him into being the lead back. And you're right, 22 carries, played 63% of the snaps. We're not expecting. Are we expecting the Jets to play competitive football to like make it seem like they're not trying to lose games? What's their plan there? Plus, the Raiders have been one of the worst run defenses in football. So I really don't want any part of this Jets offense. If I had to, grab one, it would be a receiver, probably like Mims if he's still available. But yeah, other than that, I don't really have much. You have to be in like in a deep league, 14 team, 16 team, and Ty Johnson sure becomes a guy.
I agree, but I got to ask you about somebody else that I think is really only for deep leagues. So we saw Antonio Gibson go out last night, which is what is probably turf toe, which is not something you can come back from easily. So if it turns out that's the case, you could be losing him for effectively your season. And I'm assuming J.D. McKissic is no longer out there because we've been, telling you guys to get McKissic as a backup for a while now with Alex Smith, and he gets the targets. But Peyton Barber, is Peyton Barber possibly going to get a few goal line carries? I mean, the matchup next week isn't great. It's San Francisco. But, in a deep league, do we go get Peyton Barber?
I think you have to just for the goal line carries. I mean, Peyton Barber isn't a good football player. I don't understand why he continues to find his way on the rosters here. You look at his time with Tampa Bay, he averaged 3.1 yards per carry last year. This year he's averaging 2.7. He's a short yardage running back, but he's not even a good short yardage running back. So, you have to pick him up if you're really in a bind, and hope that he, gets a goal line touchdown. Because McKissic isn't the type of running back that can get that in there either. I'm trying to look real quickly here because I remember that Bryce Love was on the IR. Do we know if he ever got activated off the IR?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so I was gonna say because if that's a guy that they have the option to step in, it's possible. Looks like November 12th was the last update. It says that he returned to practice and they had 21 days from then to activate him. So maybe Bryce Love is like a super deep. Yeah, I'm trying to see if he ever came off or not. But yeah, super deep. I don't want to play Peyton Barber, but if you have to, sure.
Absolutely. All right, now we're going to head over to wide receivers. And actually, I think there are quite a few exciting ones out there this week. This is where you could have some fun. We mentioned T.Y. Hilton earlier. It is possible that he is still available in some leagues. Now, I don't personally think T.Y. Hilton is going to have games like he had the last 2 weeks over and over again because Phillip Rivers spreads the ball around a lot. However, he has put up 2 really strong weeks, including how many yards was it this week? Over 100 yards and 110 yards and a touchdown versus Houston the week before that. Very similar numbers. So can we trust T.Y. Hilton going forward?
Yeah, I think you can because you know who they play in week 15? Houston. So, I mean, hey, if it worked once, it's got to work again, right? And then they have Vegas, in week 14. So for the next 2 weeks, these are great spots for T.Y. Hilton. And, he had a lot of near misses earlier this year where, the production wasn't there, but there's a couple times where he had a touchdown, take it back due to a penalty. He also just flat out dropped another touchdown that I remember because Fensley was flipping out about it. I like T.Y. I think they're connecting better lately. I love the 11 targets there. You're right. They definitely spread the ball around and Pittman's there and Hines and whatnot. But, these next couple of matchups at least should be favorable for him to potentially repeat this type of production.
Absolutely. Probably the biggest waiver wire claim. And actually there's quite a few wide receivers that should be popular this week is Keke Coutee, who we talked about last week, and we thought he would be popular then, but he performed even better than expected.
Yeah.
Let me look at my numbers here. I looked it up. He had 8 targets. Let's see.
Yeah, I thought it was
Kiki 9 targets, 141 yards. Now, he didn't get into the end zone, but what you're seeing here is he is going to get the attention. Now, part of that was because Cooks left midway for a concussion and came back and got reevaluated. But it looks like there's a lot of love here to go around. And one of the things that I want to point out is, for me, when I'm going into the fantasy playoffs, I want to, if I'm going to have depth and I'm going to take a deep cut, I want it from a team where I know they're going to have a lot of air yards. So Watson, even though they lost the game, and even though he had like no receivers, he still passed for 341 yards. That's his third highest mark for the season. And the team as a whole has passed for the second most yards in the league, second only to Kansas City Chiefs. So for me, Kiki Kuti is a must add. Asterisk, if you can't get Kiki Kuti, Chad Hansen.
Yeah, it's crazy that Chad Hansen came out of absolutely nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. Hasn't been on football in like 3 years. He's a former 4th-round pick of the Jets in 2017. And he played 92% of the snaps and had 5 for 101 on 7 targets rather. Yeah. So he's a guy that's going to get looks, and like you said, an offense that throws a ton. So
and even if Isaiah Coultier comes back and, he was inactive, so he basically took those outside snaps of Will Fuller's. Even if he comes back, I feel like, how do you not want to? He's probably someone you can get for free, essentially. Even if you don't have fab budget, you might be able to just grab him. Yeah. I like to keep receivers from teams that have a lot of volume on my bench, because whether he gets used or whether just one more person gets hurt. And listen, Brandon Cooks is concussion prone and Kiki Kuti is injury prone. I think you got to get him.
Yeah, I'm not hating on it. If you need a wide receiver to stash, I think he is a good guy to grab. It's crazy to think how someone that was on absolutely 0 person's radar at any point ever this year, not even like a whisper in the wind of Chad Hansen, all of a sudden he's a 100-yard receiver in week 13 as you head into your playoffs. Now, it's not a great schedule coming up for Houston. Again, at Chicago, not great. At Indy, I know they just played Indy and you had all those numbers, but at Indy, still a tough matchup. Home against Cincinnati, week 16, maybe that's your target there. But two tough road games coming up for Houston.
Yeah. All right. A few more. Because like I said, a lot of good wide receivers out there. Tim Patrick. Okay. It's time to take him seriously, right?
Should have been. There's no reason to not. I mean, once he came back from injury, he should have been on everybody's roster again. He was the number 1 receiver for Denver this entire season, but he got hurt. He missed the game or 2. And then, he's back and producing like the top receiver on the team. Now, I understand that Noah Fant or Judy or maybe sexier names, but it's hard to deny what Patrick has put together for a year this season. So I'm all in for it. The 2 touchdowns against Kansas City were great. Almost helped me win a showdown slate. I had him in my captain spot there on Sunday. So, nice. I agree with you. Carolina, Buffalo, Chargers, next 3 games for him. And I like that these are games where, Denver's going to have to throw the football probably. They're not a very good football team. They could be trailing in some of those contests. And, if Drew Lock has to sling it, it's going to mean good production for the receivers. And Patrick should be a guy that benefits from that.
Absolutely. All right. Another wide receiver I really like, and maybe it's because I have this problem where I don't know why I constantly get caught watching the Jacksonville games, but I just do. For whatever reason, Gardner Minshew is fine. His thumb is back and he's been begging to play, but Doug Marrone says he's going to go with Mike Glennon again. So seeing as that's the case, Colin Johnson is someone I'm pretty interested in because the two have put up back-to-back really solid performances. I think their chemistry developed because they're both playing as number 2s, but over the past 2 weeks, Johnson's seen 14 targets, 8 catches, 162 yards, and a touchdown. He's big, 6'6". Conley and Chark were back. So the first week it did it, I was like, there's no Conley, no Chark. Conley and Chark were both back, and Glennon had trouble. Like Chark had the snaps and he had some opportunity, but they just didn't connect. So they're facing the Tennessee Titans, and as we said earlier, Baker Mayfield threw for 334 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I'm interested in Colin Johnson, if maybe just for this Sunday.
I think Johnson is definitely worth maybe like a speculative ad if you're in a deep league. Mm-hmm. The one thing to note, like you said, though, is they got healthier at receiver. 2 weeks ago, he played 80% of the offensive snaps. That dipped to 55% this week. So, he was on the field for less. He was able to still be productive. went on the field because, like you said, he's got some sort of chemistry there. Maybe it's just as simple as the fact that defenses were focusing on, stopping Chark and Conley and whatnot, and he was able to take advantage of that. So, I would like it better if Chark and them were still out, but it's shown that at least he's still playing over 50% of the snaps. He's definitely on the field now. He has a role in this offense, and for that reason, I think he's worth picking up.
Yeah, he still saw 6 targets, even though he, and he saw 8 the week before, so 2 more. What I saw from watching it was Chark, it just didn't work between he and Glennon for whatever reason, even though they were giving him the opportunity. So, and I don't think it was just the defense. I actually think it was those guys. They weren't communicating. Right. That's what it looked like. So we'll see, but I'm interested as a deeper ad. All right, and then we got to ask about Sims. Which Sims in Washington? Cam Sims, of course, who had a big game. Is he someone you would take a deep look at?
Yeah, I mean, he was sort of been on our radar a little bit, because he had produced when the other Sims was out. And then the other Sims came back, Steve Sims, that is, and Cam Sims, disappeared for a bit, but now he had a big game the other day. So, I think it's sort of hit or miss with this offense and what to expect from the passing game. But now that Gibson's gone, they may have to lean more on throwing the football, and that can open things up for a guy like Sims. And McLaurin's not 100% either. He's dealing with an ankle. He didn't look good last week, or yesterday rather, against Pittsburgh. So, I don't mind Ken Sims. I think he's someone that you should be, should have been on your radar probably already. And now, San Francisco, Seattle, Carolina. San Francisco's a tough spot, but, home against Seattle should be a really good play for them. And then Carolina as well. So, I don't mind the ad there with Sims, especially if we think Gibson misses more time.
Yeah. All right, let's move over to tight end. So I want to ask you, I want to go about this a different way. I think throughout the season, people have begun streaming tight end because it's been such a mess.
No other option.
No other option. And there are some interesting receivers out there on the wire that I noticed in 12-team leagues, even in 14-team leagues. I'm going to name a few that I've seen on the wire. Tyler Higbee, Gerald Everett, Dalton Schultz. Of these 3, we're going to talk about deep ads. We're going to talk about Jordan Reed, these people, which we've talked about over and over again, and Anthony Ferkser. But of these 3 guys who are kind of known, and honestly, even in a few leagues, Mike Gesicki is still out there. Who do we prioritize?
I mean, if Gesicki's out there, I've been a big Gesicki guy this year, even though he is, again, like everybody else, been so hit or miss all season long. I don't know what it is, but he had 11 targets last week. He had 9 catches for 88 yards and a score. Back-to-back weeks now with touchdowns. The targets the last 4 weeks, 5 and 3, and then the 11 yesterday. So, I like Gesicki. Dalton Schultz is one of the more targeted tight ends in football this year. Last I had checked, I think going into last week, he was the 6th most targeted tight end. We'll see how the game plays out today against Baltimore. Maybe that continues, but I like the idea that Dalton likes to check down to him. The Higbee Everett thing to me is kind of hard to judge. Generally Everett is their receiving tight end. Higbee does block a ton, but then we see random games where Higbee finds the end zone. He gets a little bit more target production. So, I really think if you're stuck picking between the 2 Rams guys, you just sort of throw a dart and see which ones you end up landing on. I know Andrew Cooper would probably tell us to go with Gerald Everett there, but if Gesicki's on your waiver wire, I would pick him up. I would pick Schultz. So I would go either of those 2 over the Rams tight ends. I'd probably go Everett over Higbee, but it's really tough.
Would you go Higbee or Anthony Ferkser?
I mean, if Johnny was out, I have no problem going back to Ferkser. I mean, this is what we expected the role for him to be. He's a pass catching pretty much only. He's a wide receiver playing tight end, right? So they're not going to ask him to block when they're in games where they're trailing, like they were against Cleveland, and games where they have to throw. Then Ferkser's going to benefit from that. If they're in games where they're ahead or they can ground it out, he's not going to be as effective because they're going to put Pruitt out there and Pruitt's going to block, and even though Pruitt sniped touchdown reception last week, that was just, don't
count on that, guys.
Yeah, exactly. So
2 targets.
I like Ferkser if Johnny's out. If not, you can still go back to Schultz or Gesicki.
Okay, how about Higbee or Jordan Reed?
Oh, Reed, for sure.
Okay, Higbee or Russ Welly?
Higbee. I would go Higbee.
I think I would go Higbee too. All right, we're just trying to help you guys because this is what happens. I know when you go in and you're you're scrolling and you're like, oh, I didn't think that guy would be available.
Right.
And just because we're talking about certain people on the waiver wire, targets, we haven't seen what happens to be available on your league. And I think tight end is one area where someone pretty good could have gotten dropped because someone was frustrated with them and no one noticed that they're out there. I don't think that will be the case for Logan Thomas after this week. I think everyone's going to be on him. However, Logan Thomas probably would be the top tight end to add if he's available for this week. Would you say?
Sure. Yeah. I can't imagine at this point that he is available. I'm looking at one of my leagues. It's a 14-team league, so it's already pretty deep, and there's not much out here. Let me tell you that much.
Are the Rams guys there?
No Rams players are available. There's like Dawson Knox, Cole Kmet. If Cole Kmet is available, that's a guy you should take a look at. He had 7 targets this week, 5 receptions. He outsnapped Jimmy Graham. He's got Houston, Minnesota, Jacksonville coming up. Right. So really good matchup. So yeah, Cole Kmet. That's your deep guy this week, I think, at tight end.
I like it. I like the Cole Kmet call. Very good. All right. Time's already flown. We're done. I don't know how it goes so quickly. Guys, if you need more help with your waiver wire ads, there will be someone in the chat 24/7 at fantasyalarm.com. And in fact, Jon Impemba himself is in the chat.
I'm on Twitter all day. If you need help in your fantasy defenses, not only do we have the waiver wire article with some recommendations, I also wrote a breakdown myself about waiver wire defenses to add that you can sort of mix and match for your playoff run. That's live on site right now as well. So give those a look because, again, defenses are just as tough almost, it seems like, than picking a tight end this year. So
yes.
It's all about finding the right matchups.
Absolutely. So we are going to help you. We're going to help you win. In the meantime, you guys enjoy your Tuesday night football, and we will catch you next time.